I never expected to go to war over grass. But in this neighborhood, under the rule of Karen, the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac, even the smallest things could turn into full-blown battles. It started with a clipboard. Then came the HOA violation notices. Then the threats. But when she tried to take my house, things went from petty to downright insane. What she didn't know. I'm an off-duty cop. And I was done playing nice. Hello, beautiful people. Before we dive in, a small click from you can help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Hit that subscribe button. It was a peaceful Saturday morning in my quiet suburban neighborhood. The kind of place where people waved politely, kids rode their bikes without a care, and the biggest drama was whether the Johnsons would outdo their Christmas decorations again this year. I was finally enjoying a well-earned day off from my job as a cop, sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the world go by. And then she appeared. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac, the ruler of all things petty, a woman whose clipboard held more power, in her mind, than the actual HOA board. She marched down the sidewalk with purpose, her signature scowl in place, eyes locked onto my property like a hawk hunting its prey. I had barely set my coffee down when she stopped abruptly in front of my house, arms crossed, tapping her foot in judgment. You know, she said, her voice dripping with condescension, your grass is exactly half an inch too long. I blinked. Excuse me? She thrust a laminated HOA rule sheet in my face, as if it were a royal decree. Page 12. Section 5. Lawn Maintenance Guidelines. This is a clear violation. I glanced at my yard, which was, by all reasonable accounts, perfectly maintained. Karen, it's grass. It grows. She gasped as if I had just committed an unspeakable crime. Rules exist for a reason. If everyone just let their yards go wild, what would happen to property values? I took a deep breath. I had dealt with criminals, unruly drunks, and the occasional high-speed chase in my line of work. But nothing tested my patience quite like Karen on a power trip. I'll take care of it, I said, hoping to end the conversation quickly. But Karen wasn't done. She wasn't even close to done. You also have an unauthorized garden gnome, she added, pointing toward the small, harmless ceramic figure by my flower bed. And it's not in the approved color scheme. I stared at her, wondering if this was a joke. It wasn't. Karen was just getting started. The next morning, I woke up to find a bright yellow notice taped to my front door. HOA violation. Failure to comply with community standards. I sighed, already knowing exactly who was behind it. Stepping outside, I spotted Karen across the street, clipboard in hand, watching like a hawk. She had the smuggest look I'd ever seen, standing there as if she'd just caught me committing a federal crime. You left your garbage cans out for an extra 15 minutes yesterday, she called out before I could say anything. I ran a hand down my face. Karen, the trash truck came late. She pursed her lips. Rules are rules. And I've noticed several other infractions. Before I could ask what ridiculous accusation she was about to make, she flipped open her binder, which I now realized was labeled community offenders in big, bold letters. For one, your mailbox is 2 inches taller than regulation. I blinked. You measured my mailbox? I take my duties very seriously. That was an understatement. She wasn't done. And let's talk about that car in your driveway. I glanced at my own legally parked vehicle. What about it? She narrowed her eyes. It's an eyesore. It's a standard-issue police cruiser, I said flatly. Karen scoffed. It ruins the aesthetic of the neighborhood. I was starting to wonder if this woman had ever heard of priorities. Karen, I live here, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. My job is literally to protect people. I think my car is the least of anyone's problems. She waved a dismissive hand. Well, I'll be submitting a formal complaint to the HOA. And if you don't bring your lawn into compliance, I will have to escalate this. I took a deep breath. I had faced down armed suspects, high-stakes negotiations, and unpredictable criminals, but nothing had prepared me for the sheer force of Karen's entitlement. She walked away with the air of someone who had just won a great battle, clipboard held high, probably off to measure someone else's flower bed. I knew then that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I decided to play it cool. After all, I dealt with far worse than an overzealous HOA tyrant with a superiority complex. So, I did exactly what I said I would. I mowed my lawn. But instead of cutting it a perfect uniform length, I left an unmistakable half-inch strip of grass right at the edge of my property. A message. Karen noticed. That afternoon, she stormed over, pointing furiously at the offending strip of grass like she had just uncovered a crime scene. "Do you think this is funny?" she demanded. I took a long sip of my iced tea. "What do you mean?" She flailed her clipboard in the air. "You know what I mean. That grass is still half an inch too long." I squinted at it, then at her. "Huh. Would you look at that?" Her face turned a shade of red I'd only seen during high-speed pursuits. "I am reporting you to the HOA board again." I shrugged. "Go right ahead." And she did. The next day, I received another official HOA notice, this time citing my blatant disregard for neighborhood harmony. The pettiness was reaching Olympic levels. So, I got creative. First, I painted my front door the exact same shade as Karen's. If mine was a violation, so was hers. Then, I started documenting everything she did. Every time she trespassed to inspect my lawn, I recorded it. Every fake complaint she filed, I kept the paperwork. Every time she loomed over my property line with a tape measure, snap, photo evidence. I was building a case, and Karen didn't even realize she was helping me do it. The best part? The neighbors were starting to take notice. "Hey," Tom from next door whispered one afternoon. She told me my bird feeder was an unauthorized structure. I chuckled. "That checks out. She's losing it, man. Last week, she accused my cat of trespassing." I raised an eyebrow. "Your cat?" He nodded solemnly. "She says he sits on her porch and stares aggressively." It was official. Karen was out of control. And I wasn't the only one ready to fight back. The neighborhood was waking up. Karen had been on her power trip for years, but now that I was pushing back, others started coming forward with their own Karen horror stories. Tom, the guy next door, was still fuming about the trespassing cat accusation. "She actually sent me a formal letter," he whispered, holding up a crumpled HOA notice. "She claims my cat loiters with intent to intimidate." I nearly spit out my coffee. "Your cat is 15 years old and missing half his teeth. Tell her that." Then there was Mrs. Thompson down the street. She approached me one morning, lowering her voice like she was passing state secrets. "Last Halloween, she tried to ban decorations," she said. I frowned. "Why?" She said ghosts and skeletons promote anti-HOA sentiment. I blinked. Ghosts? She called them neighborhood vandalism with a supernatural theme. The stories kept coming. There was the dad who got a violation notice because his kids' chalk drawings weren't HOA-approved colors. The guy who had to fight a fine because Karen decided his driveway was too gray. The poor soul who once parked his truck facing the wrong direction. A crime punishable by Karen-induced rage. And now, thanks to her personal vendetta against me, everyone was finally fed up. "Look," said Tom, crossing his arms. "We're all sick of this. But nobody ever fights back. Maybe you should, really fight back." I grinned. "Oh, I'm way ahead of you." Because while Karen had spent years bullying the neighborhood, she had one critical weakness. She was breaking her own rules. And I had the evidence to prove it. It was time to turn the tables. For years, Karen had tormented the neighborhood with her obsessive rule enforcement, but no one had ever dared to challenge her. That was about to change. Armed with a stack of evidence, I attended the next HOA meeting. Karen, of course, arrived early, binder in hand, ready to present her latest grievances against me. She didn't know I had my own binder, Karen's greatest hits, and it was about to steal the show. As soon as the meeting began, she wasted no time. "I want to discuss repeated violations by certain homeowners who refuse to respect the rules," she announced, shooting me a smug glance. I stayed quiet. Let her dig her own grave. She launched into a full-blown PowerPoint presentation, complete with photos of my house taken at various angles. "This," she said, clicking to a close-up of my front yard, "is the type of behavior that devalues our community. The grass? Non-compliant. The mailbox? An eyesore. The car? Unacceptable." Someone coughed. "Karen," one board member finally said, adjusting his glasses, "is that a police vehicle?" She waved a dismissive hand. "That's not the point." Feels like an important point. Before she could argue, I stood up. "If we're discussing violations, I'd like to bring up a few of my own." I calmly opened my binder and began laying out the real violations, Karen's violations. Unauthorized holiday decorations. Her yard was practically a Christmas explosion every year. A fence that was an inch too high. Oh yes, I measured. Her trash cans? Left out overnight. Multiple times. Surveillance of neighbors without consent. Those photos she'd taken of my house? Illegal. Trespassing to measure my lawn, video evidence included. I could see her face changing colors like a malfunctioning traffic light. "This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "I was simply ensuring compliance." The HOA president sighed. "Karen, you can't enforce rules, you're breaking yourself." That's when I pulled out my trump card. "Also," I said, flipping to the final page, "Karen has no official position within the HOA." Silence. I let that one sink in. Karen's whole power trip? The complaints? The citations? The binder of community offenders? None of it was official. She was nothing more than a nosy neighbor with a clipboard and an inflated ego. The board members exchanged glances. "Karen," the HOA president said slowly, "you're not actually on the board. You don't have any authority to issue violations." The room went dead silent. Then one voice broke through Tom. "Wait, so you mean we've been listening to her for years for no reason?" A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. The expressions on people's faces shifted from fear to anger to realization. Karen was finished. Karen's reign of terror ended that night. The HOA board, now fully aware that Karen had been acting with zero actual authority, wasted no time setting the record straight. Effective immediately, the president announced, Karen will no longer be allowed to submit complaints on behalf of the HOA. The words hit like a thunderclap. Karen shot to her feet. "You can't do this. I have spent years keeping this neighborhood in order. You need me." Tom, ever the hero, leaned back in his chair and smirked. "Pretty sure we don't." That was just the beginning. The board went through the violations I had presented, her unauthorized decorations, fence height violations, and repeated trespassing complaints, and decided that, for the first time ever, Karen would face real consequences. A formal HOA violation notice was issued to her. The best part? A fine. A hefty fine. Karen's face went completely blank as the president slid the paper across the table. "You'll have 30 days to correct these issues, Karen, or face additional penalties." For the first time in history, Karen was speechless. And just like that, the neighborhood had won. Outside the meeting, the mood was electric. People were celebrating like it was the 4th of July. "Did you see her face?" Someone laughed. "She's finally getting a taste of her own medicine," another neighbor said. Tom clapped me on the back. "You did it, man. You took down the queen of the cul-de-sac." It didn't stop there. In the following weeks, Karen was forced to comply with the same ridiculous rules she had been weaponizing for years. She had to take down her massive, unapproved Christmas display. The HOA made sure she did it by the book. She had to fix her fence and pay a ridiculous amount in fines. And best of all, she was officially barred from attending HOA meetings as an enforcer. Without her power, without her clipboard, Karen was just another neighbor. And for the first time in years, the cul-de-sac was Karen-free. The neighborhood felt different after Karen's downfall. Lighter. Happier. Like we had all collectively been released from a suburban dictatorship we didn't even realize we were living under. Gone were the days of paranoid glances over our shoulders, fearing a clipboard ambush. No more surprise violation notices, no more exaggerated power trips, and best of all, no more Karen marching around like she owned the place. For the first time in years, people started enjoying their homes again. Tom put up a colorful birdhouse just to spite her. Mrs. Thompson decorated for Halloween like she was running a haunted attraction. The guy down the street let his kids draw a full-blown mural in chalk on his driveway. Karen? She vanished. Oh, she was still technically there, but after the HOA shut her down, she went uncharacteristically quiet. No more surprise inspections. No more unsolicited complaints. She stopped patrolling the sidewalks, stopped measuring lawns, stopped treating mailbox colors like a matter of national security. It was almost eerie. And then, a few months later, a for sale sign popped up in her yard. By the time she moved out, the whole neighborhood threw a block party. Unofficially, of course. We weren't sure if block parties were HOA approved, but for the first time in forever, no one cared. As I sat on my porch, watching people laugh and celebrate, Tom clinked his drink against mine. "You did it," he said, grinning. "You freed us from the tyranny." I smirked. I just reminded her that rules apply to everyone, even her. He laughed. "Think she'll try this at her new neighborhood?" I shrugged. "Not my problem." The grass grew freely. The mailboxes stood proudly. The HOA returned to normal, and peace settled over the cul-de-sac. And we all learned a valuable lesson. Always keep your driveways Karen-proof.